Get to it.
Let's do this. Let's get our game on, baby.
So we return for some reason.
Do we?
Maybe. Unless
I don't think.
apocalyptic
I mean,
catastrophe happens in the next couple days.
it
Which,
happens
which
every
given
day.
how things have been going, possible. But yes,
Unless,
oh, so we're
unless,
safe, actually.
maybe.
Got to do this forever, guys. Yippee.
Anyways, so what are we doing today, my man?
Yes, so Layer 1 is back. A little later than
For now.
expected. We did one, but I botched it, so that's another day's problem.
Yeah, lost
So,
media.
last actual for real. You can only hear
Layer one lost.
one half of the conversation if you want. Uh,
Yeah. It'll
schizophrenic.
exactly. It just sounds like Koji having a schizophrenic conversation with the voices in his head.
Which,
It's very funny.
what's new, but
I mean, yeah.
yes. We're finally covering it. The thing that the podcast is named after.
True.
We finally got to it in our like 17th episode, I guess now.
It took a while, but we did it.
But
We did
hey,
it.
yeah. The good old Serial Experiments Lane, the truest of Kino. Good old anime.
That's correct. Yes. So, how would you describe Serial Experiments Lain? I feel like that's a big
Ooh, there's a lot to it. Like your average, you know, jitter poster who's in love with it doesn't. They just look at the funny girl who likes her computers and are like, haha, cool. But it's so dense with like conspiracy and prophetic view of like technology just in general. And
Yeah.
there's so there's a lot of like real stuff that's talked about, like real each
Well,
conspiracies or like groups or events.
it's in this similar vein as the science adventure series or something
Yes.
like Deus Ex, where it brings in real life kind of conspiracy, urban legend, lore into it. I wouldn't say it's really about that though, so much
No,
as
no, it's like
it's
a backdrop kind of like world
yeah, it's
building.
and and there is something about it that I think is important to actually understanding the story of that people. I don't ever see anyone ever talking about, but we'll get to that later. I think.
Yes. Yeah, so the one thing about it is, of course, it's a one of the good early views of what people thought I kind of like what the internet would become, kind of VR, kind of just digital space as a whole, like a glimpse into the near future of that type of technology.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that like the VR aspect of it was supposed to be more metaphorical than anything. I
Yeah,
think it's really what makes Serial Experiments Lane such a landmark, really, in not just the anime medium, but I think in storytelling, really as a whole, is that it's one of the first stories to really try and grapple with the internet, what it is, what its effect on people and society will be,
yeah,
and what that means for what it means for really young people who at the time, was a future thing, right? Where it's like we're gonna have a, a generation of young people who grew up with this, and that's what Lane's about, really. I think that's why it's really important that Lane is the age that she is in the story,
Yeah,
right? Um, this isn't just your average anime where it's like the character's a teenage girl because it's marketable. No, I think it's actually an important part of the story that you know this is a story about what would later be termed digital natives
yeah,
before most digital natives would be born, right? Which is
yeah,
that's
exactly.
really um it's breakthrough, right? And it's the accuracy with which it was able to understand that
Was
is
impressive and frightening a
impressive,
little.
very very impressive. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's Serial Experiments Lain came out in 1998, right? Um,
Yeah,
and it was in production for a few years before that, I think, like one or two maybe. Um, and so what people don't really seem to remember when discussing Lane is that the internet was already a thing by this point, right?
yeah,
Um, so you kind of it's not like the internet didn't exist for like Lane, the people making Lane to have it anything to
no,
go off of, right? Anyone who was paying attention would be able to see kind of where things were heading, right? And
yeah, yeah. It was kind of like just like a bit of an extrapolation of like what the internet was at that time to like the more social aspect of it, because of course earlier on it
exactly,
wasn't the whole social thing. It was more just you can get information. Yeah, maybe you could find a little
yeah,
chat room or a little board or something, but
exactly,
it's still pretty sparse, and is mostly just
yeah,
inhabited by your average
eh,
like computer nerds or like that
bingo,
sort of thing, not the average person as we're presented in Lane of just little like middle school kid kind of thing, just being exposed to it
exactly,
for the first time in the story of like, oh, she gets her first computer and that sort of stuff, and shenanigans
yeah,
ensue.
yeah. Exactly. It's like I was saying, right? Is at the time of Lane's release, right? The internet was a thing, but it was largely still just a thing for nerds, right?
Yeah,
It was something for people who there used to be an archetype really of the kind of person who would use the internet, right? But now, over the course of the past decade plus or so, really the internet has become this thing that everyone uses, right? Your
yeah,
your your mom and dad, your grandma and grandpa, right? Your uncles, your cousins, middle school kids, right?
yeah.
Like
And for the
everyone is on
most
the internet,
part,
and that's really what Lane's about. Is
yeah,
again, what a society that people are born into the internet really looks like. It's horrifying, and look outside. It's horrifying.
yes, yes, very accurate prediction. Just again without the cool aesthetics.
Well, yeah, every such case at this point,
Every
like,
such case, yeah.
oh
Like,
hey,
oh,
this
it's still gonna look
dystopian, like,
weird and ethereal and kind of like ooh, like that like Fruitiger Arrow aesthetics and like old Mac stuff. It's like no, sorry, clean
dude, yeah,
corporatized.
Lane has some sick like design for like its like
Yeah,
UI and stuff.
yes, yeah.
I
No, the
don't even know
Navi
what you
stuff
would call
is
that. That's like
it's its own
that's like
thing. It's
classic like late '90s like cyberpunk type design for like UIs and shit, right? Where it's like
yeah,
it it reminds me of like the UI for like the original Xbox, if you remember that.
yes,
Shit
yes,
was
I do.
catch.
Yeah, yeah, that,
Very, very like that, just a different color scheme.
yeah,
But yeah, so like you have in Lane this very an exploration of what really of how the internet kind of reduces people to almost animals, right? I think that's
Yeah,
like your
it's
baser parts. I think that's a big part of why, aside from Lane and some a handful of other powerful Wired users, most people on the Wired, if they're not just out and out invisible shadows, right? They're mouths or
yeah,
ears
Maoris.
or
Yeah,
eyes,
yeah. They
right?
can't manifest fully. They're just an aspect of a person type of thing. Like just not even you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
you said, like a shadow is the perfect just general description. Is just you
Yeah,
know a mask or something.
but I think Lane, it's one of those things where and it's kind of the point, right? Lane herself, you have the whole like plot line where there's multiple different lanes, right? You
Yes.
know, you have Lane Irakura, the shy, quiet girl who just goes to school and doesn't really have any friends except for one. Yeah, you have Lane of the Wired, right? Who's like this boisterous bad bitch, right?
Yeah.
Who kind of owns the place no matter where, whenever she steps into one. Um, and you have like the fucking like crazy kind of like evil sadistic Lane. Um, and so one of the things that I think that as well as the stuff with the whole like people in the Wired typically appear as like shadows, mouths, whatever. I think what that kind of hints at is that there's this weird dichotomy with the internet where everyone's always asking which is the real Lane,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But that's a bad question to ask, right? Because in a way, it's all of them and also none of them,
Yeah.
because they're all Lane, they're all her, they're all parts of her, right? It's just uh, she's they manifest themselves, these different aspects of her and of other people on the Wired really manifest themselves really depending on where they are around who they're around, right?
Yeah.
The big
Exactly.
dichotomy being whether it's IRL or the Wired, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You get
Because
this with the Knights later
oh
on too, where like the Knights are this like mysterious kind of shadowy force, right? These like super hackers who are like can hack reality and like assassinate people with their elite hacking skills, and then you find out they're like moms and sweaty nerds or businessmen. Like they're normal people who you wouldn't suspect of being elite, dangerous, murderous, fucking reality hackers. They're just normal. One's literally a housewife.
yeah.
So again, it contributes to this mood of like you being a really funny word and concept, right? Where it's just like, well, you're a different you, whether you're online or offline, depending
Yeah.
on
Exactly.
who you are around online and offline, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It
and how
definitely
this
goes into that about the like that. It touches. It was a bigger thing back then. And clearly, a lot of it's faded now, but some of us still hold to the anonymity of the internet. Like that adds to it. Those little
well,
personas of just little parts. So it's like, oh, it's just you're masking like that. They don't know that it's just like, oh, just a regular person. It's like, oh, this spooky pair of eyeballs is actually just like a business guy, and it's like, oh, okay.
I don't think it's even just that. Though I think that does play a part of it. I think it's also
Yeah.
just the fact that like, regardless of whether you drop your real name or not, your real identity, being on the internet changes how you act, right? It's you. because it's not reality. Because you're interfacing with other people via the medium of the internet, whether it be a forum or a social media site. Um, you're not the same you, right? And I think that's why it's important that Lane of the Wired is not, it's not that she's not Lane. It's not that she's like going by an alias, right?
Mhm.
It's Lane. Her name, she uses her name Lane, right? And
Yes.
she looks like herself. So she's identifiable as Lane of the Wired is as identifiable as the Lane as Lane Irakura, the Lane who goes to school, the shy quiet girl.
Mhm.
But again, just the mere state of being on the internet changes how you act.
Yeah,
Changes
exactly.
what version of you show to people, to the world. Um,
Yes.
and so it one of the big things I think like this the show's kind of trying to get to is that ironically I think this kind of connects. Well, not ironically, this connects to the big kind of tagline of the show is everyone is connected, right? And
Mhm.
how the the wired connects everyone, and this is actually a problem, right? Because what ends up happening is you kind of get um a world where everyone's connected kind of inevitably creates an exponentially expanding amount of use,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because think about it in this way, right? Before the internet, especially, but even just think even just before mass communication, you wouldn't have as many hues, right? There wouldn't be as many
No,
kind
there'd
of
be like maybe
masks you have.
yeah, maybe like three at most. If
Yeah,
you're thinking of like, oh, around your family, around friends, and work and public, just in general, it's like that's about it. Like,
and frankly, a lot of the time there probably wouldn't be that much
exactly. Yeah, there wouldn't be much of a difference. You'd
difference.
just be, yeah, it'd almost be two. It'd be like, like public life and then like, the people who know you
It'd
type
be
of
it'd
thing.
be it'd be public life. It would be private life, and I think I think that would really be it, with maybe the exception of like married life, right?
Oh,
I think
yes, of course.
there's a difference between. We could go on and on
Yeah,
about
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, what would be the differences. The point is
Just a
that you would have
generalization.
way
Yeah.
less. Yeah, yeah. Well, you would have way less in the pre-digital world, right?
Mhm.
Because your world would be so constrained to just your community, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now
Your
with, this mass social media stuff, you could have a different personality per group chat or server
yeah,
or
and
forum or
it's to the
board and
extent
just like complete
it's
splinter of your persona.
yeah, I mean, it's to the extent where it's literally become a meme, right? Where you see memes of like, oh, when you accidentally use personality 3 around group 5, right? Shit like that. You see that shit all the time, right? Because
Yes.
like that is the reality of the digital age, right? Is like you're part of so many different kind of, not communities really. I wouldn't call what we have now communities. It would be
No.
almost kind of a communities, right? They're masquerading as communities almost.
Yeah.
But you act differently around them. You have different faces around them, and so for a lot of people, you have a myriad more, right? But even then, it, it really, I don't think it takes that much more to really kind of drive people insane, right? Like, if say people before the digital age only really had three kind of sub personalities that they kept from different groups of people. I think even just adding like a fourth or a fifth, like, can kind of bring people to the brink, right?
Yeah, yeah, because now
I
it's
think
like,
people are actually bad
how do you
at,
keep
like
it?
managing that.
Yes, exactly. And you kind of lose yourself a bit, and could explain a lot of the identity crisis problems that have
Yeah, it
kind of
explains a lot
hit
of the yeah.
humanity in the last couple decades
Oh yeah,
of,
people don't know who they are.
yeah, exactly. And it's understandably so. It's like you can think of so many different, like, oh, you could be like one way around your family, you could be one way around real life friends, and then you could be different around your online friends, and then that splinters into groups of online friends of like, oh, like, oh, this one group I'm like this, and this group I'm like this, and it's just like, damn, it's hard to keep track.
No, yeah, yeah. You lose yourself
Yeah.
in kind of the mass, right? The goo of the internet, this kind of flowing, like just. Man, I see so many people where it's just like you don't have a personality really. You have you are an automaton made out of internet memes.
Yes, you co-opt fandom of the week for your current, little mask you've put on. It's like, oh, this is my
Not
current
not even
thing.
not even not even that. I'm talking like it's so easy for me to tell when someone just gets like their entire personality from Tumblr or Reddit
Ah,
or
of
something like that,
course, yeah.
right? Where it's just like you have no ideas for yourself. You saw a Tumblr post and you went, ah, this is gonna inform how I view the world
Mhm.
for like until something more compelling comes along, basically, because
Yeah.
everyone else here is repeating this, and it's one of those things too where I think I say that and I think people can kind of misinterpret what I say in terms of like, oh, well, people have always gotten ideas from elsewhere. It's like, yeah, you're right, but the internet is one it has two problems. It's so fast moving, right, that you get the problem of hypernormalization, which honestly
Mhm.
we've mentioned it so many times now. We just need to do an episode on that concept.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly.
but it has the problem of hypernormalization where you're just getting hit with so much shit all the time, just coming by, just rushing past you, that you don't have the time to process it. And I think that's the difference, right? Is before the digital era, yes, you would read a book and you would get your ideas from that book, right? Or someone would say something and you'd get their ideas from what that person was saying. But you had the time to process it. You could have actual dialogue,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Whereas that's not really a thing anymore. And especially because on top of that, you have this problem of a kind of herd mentality, right? Where you're not just not thinking about what you come across because it's coming by so fast, but because you have so many people repeating it back at you, right? Who are just also regurgitating the latest meme, the latest
Mhm.
way of thinking, the latest way of viewing events, whatever. Um, that as we've kind of seen, people really aren't good at not following the crowd,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
the average person is just gonna follow the crowd. They're just gonna, oh well, everyone's saying this, even if frankly not everyone is actually saying that. I think the election recently is a great example. You
Mhm.
know, oh, everyone's saying, oh, like Kamala she's so brat, she's gonna win it, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like. You know how there's no way that Trump's gonna win. There's no way that the American people are gonna choose this guy. And then it's a total blowout for Trump.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like,
And it's like, oh.
see, you were deluded, and anyone with half a brain could have told you like he's gonna win, right? It was kind
Yeah.
of obvious with how awful Biden was handling so much stuff geopolitically. Um, the way Kamala was brought in, right, with no vote.
Yeah.
um, uh, the big thing was when Trump got shot at and he got back up. You know, he's literally bleeding from his ear. And you have that photo of him. You know, he gets back up. He has his fist in the air. He's shouting, "Fight, fight!" He won it right in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
He won it right in that moment. And anyone who thought otherwise, I don't know what you're like. I don't know why you would think otherwise. I just can't. I really can't fathom it. Like that, he won it in that moment. It was so obvious. Like you get shot at by. It's not just the fact that like it's just sheer aura, right, and sheer like bravado and badassery, right? Like you got shot at, you get back up and you shout "fight, fight!" Like that's just badass. Like I'm sorry.
Mhm.
But secondly, it has the other effect of like for all the conspirizing that happened online, and I saw this of like, oh, he's actually like Republican, right? Like he wasn't, right? This guy was a leftist.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
guy, like, if you actually looked up his accounts, he was a diehard leftist. So congratulations, this guy just made and you guys like the entire left look like fucking psychos, right?
Yeah.
Who are trying to kill their political enemies. And it's like, yeah, of course people are not going to vote for that, right? I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you try to like one of your guys tried to kill a guy, and people looked at that and went, "You're kind of that's insane." It's because no one actually like disavowed that really. It was just, oh man, I wish he should have aimed better, right?
Yeah.
Uh, which is funny, I'll admit, right? But that looks insane to normal people.
Yes, it does.
Um, that looks insane. That looks insane. Or again, it was denying that he was even one of them, right? It was denying that he was what he was. You know, oh, he's a Republican. You know, he's actually a right winger. He's a disgruntled right winger. Blah blah blah. It's like, no, no, he wasn't. You're lying now, or you're falling for conspiracies. And then again, later you get genuine like insane conspiracy theories from the left that it was like a false flag, that it wasn't real. It's like a dude died. Come on, like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Right? Like, come on, like you're actually just sounding even more insane collectively now that you're doing shit like this, right? Though you're just denying the veracity of the event that everyone saw live, on TV.
yeah.
Um, and you're saying, he he conspired to shoot at himself? Like, no, come on,
Of
that's
course.
just
And
it's fucking stupid. It's like genuinely like insane fucking like beyond even Alex Jones type shit, and the
on the
left was wondering how they
tier of
lost.
the JFK is like, oh, actually, his head just did that. You know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But
There's
that's funny. It's so patently ridiculous that like no one actually believes it except maybe some fucking schizo somewhere on the internet. Um, and it's been like half a century, right?
yeah.
Like a guy died and you people and the left starts doing this insanoid conspirizing like the day after basically. It's just like, okay guys, like come on. Like calm down, right? And so it's like
Mhm.
you do everything to make yourselves look like insane conspiracy terrorists and then wonder why no one votes for you. And frankly, you thought people were gonna that you thought people were gonna vote for you to begin with is just fucking insane, right? Like,
Mhm.
again, it's just one of those things where, as we were saying earlier, so, sorry, this is kind of a tangent, but I think it genuinely is exemplary of what Lane was getting at, where kind of the internet kind of acts as this accelerant, which is funny if you consider. I'm not even saying it's funny. I think it was probably intentional symbolism. The drug in Serial Experiments Lain, Excella,
Oh yeah.
right?
Exactly.
That kind of, again, it drives people insane, right? It's this kind of techno drug. It's not even like a chemical. It's a chip that, like, it's like a nano chip that messes with people's brains, and it makes them see shit, and they lose their minds, and then they fucking die. And you can see how, in a way, that's a metaphor for what the internet does now, that we know it does now, where, again, it kind of, you get this kind of networked um psychosis almost, right? You see, people just get driven insane. You have this madness of digital crowds where just complete irreality.
Yeah, network psychosis is a good one. That's a good term.
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
The
that's
Black Knight
pretty
Satellite told me to say
but
it.
genuinely accurate. Like,
Right? You know, yeah.
it's like, it's one thing for people to just spout stuff on the internet.
There's always
Of
been
course,
internet schizos.
yeah, it's one thing, but when it's like people have been like completely like, again, the oh, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Well, some of these people do, and they're like,
A
oh
lot of
my,
people do. A lot of people
yeah,
do. I
too
think at this
many
point
do.
it's safe to say most people do, actually.
Yeah, like every single thing that's just like, oh,
I mean,
real, like
frankly,
this.
frankly, we're no we're
Oh
well we're
yeah,
we
but
I will say we are better, but, like, we're not that much better,
no,
right?
like
Like,
of course we fall for things sometimes. It happens, and it's
yeah,
because it's just
yeah.
getting so hard with like the
Well,
nonstop
because Lane is
flow of
ultimately Lane is ultimately correct that the wired and the real world were going to merge. That's what's happened. We're living in the post-merge world.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, to them in the show, that's like a ooh, that's a that was like kind of the big like background conflict of like, do they want to bring the real world into the wired, or bring the wired out, like into reality, basically, of
yeah.
the between the nights, and kind of what Lane ends up doing. The
What
Men in
Lane ends up
Black
doing
and
is what Lane ends up doing. I think we'll save that for later, because I think that's
yeah,
probably the
that's
most
another.
important part of the story.
Mhm.
But so this whole conspiracy tangent, I was going to say aside, but no, not really aside, because I think this leads into another part of Lane that I think is really important that no one really talks about, because it's just kind of, I mean, it's talked about in terms of, like, oh yeah, and there's this weird, like, conspiracy alien stuff, but that's just Lane being weird. And it's just like, I actually don't think it's just Lane being weird. um I was thinking about it, and I think Lane ties into some of our earlier topics in the American Shinto saga, specifically when it the like kind of cyber demonology,
Mhm.
aliens or demons type stuff. This is something that is a part of Lane that is never talked about. It's never really analyzed, right? In I think a way that's satisfactory,
Yeah.
frankly. Um, I've seen a few people touch on it, but again, never in a way that's like, that's convinced me that what they're saying is actually accurate to what the story is at least hinting at with all this stuff. Because you get you get the Men in Black in Serial
Yes.
Experiments Lain. They are part of Serial Experiments Lain. And not only that, you get aliens, like,
Yeah, it brings up the
gr-
whole Roswell thing, and
so yeah, we'll get to that once
yeah,
in, like, a second, because there is, I think there's two, like, points in the show where, like, aliens appear to Lane, like gray aliens, like the little grays
yes,
with big heads, black eyes, just straight up appear to Lane. For To most people appears to be no reason. Like, there's no reason why these things are there. There's no, like, hint at what the hell they could be, like, what they could mean plot wise. With the sole exception, yes, of one episode. I believe it's layer 9.
mhm,
Um where throughout the episode you get small little faux documentary snippets. Like a if anyone's ever seen like classic like 90s like UFO docs, it has that vibe to it. It's very it's really good actually. It's a
Yes,
very
no, it's
it's kind of dreamlike and surreal, but like also just it hits you with hard facts,
yeah, especially
right? It
for
has
an anime too. Like usually, stuff's pretty like contained, but when your anime cuts to like real footage and real like, you know, scientists or historical, you know,
it's awesome. It's
people,
great.
it's like, oh wow, okay, we're getting into point at the real thing. It's like, huh,
Yeah.
do you know?
So the episode starts with a segment on the Roswell crash. And you're like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Right? Other than the fact that it apparently hits to the fact that the Roswell crash just actually happened in the world of Lane, and that maybe that explains the aliens, but like it also
Eh,
kind of doesn't because
yeah.
the aliens are, it's the aliens are weird in that it's never clear whether they're appearing to Lane in reality or the Wired,
Oh yeah,
which is
exactly.
interesting. Very interesting. Again, I don't really see people talking about that because I mean, one, it's hard to tell what's happening in reality and the Wired
Yeah,
in Lane
like
just in general.
at first it's a little clear, but as the show goes on, it deteriorates into like just a complete blurring almost.
Yeah,
Of course, that's the whole point of it.
and so that's the whole point. But the alien encounters happen towards this ending, so I can see why people just kind of dismiss it as wired weirdness.
Specifically because the little gray is wearing like a Freddy Krueger sweater for some
Yeah, yeah,
reason.
yeah. You're like, why is the alien wearing a sweater? What? But again, I think that just hints. Again, I think is that sweater is actually super indicative of what is going on with the aliens in the show, right?
Hmm,
Like, I genuinely think it's purposely supposed to be a Freddy Krueger reference, right?
yeah.
Because the Wired is kind of supposed to be, uh, at the very end, you get a like Lane's talking to herself, not in like she's talking to herself, but like she's talking to like another her in the reflection of a trans-dimensional subways window. It's really weird. It's lame, dude. Um, and this other lane like strongly implies that the Wired, like we were talking about in those early episodes, is a kind of border world between reality and something else. What exactly that other world is on the other side of the Wired, no one knows. But the Wired is kind of supposed to be um it's a dream world, really, right? It's the world of the human unconscious, right? And I think that's part of what Lane as a show is trying to say with why people kind of become these lesser, more animalistic parts of themselves, right? Because the internet in the real world is almost kind of a dream world, like the Wired and Lane, right? Is
Yeah.
this world of the human subconscious where you just get pure id, right?
Yeah.
Ego. It's that, right? It's just people just digitally devolving into their more primal selves. And a big part of Lane is kind of the danger that the Wired and thus the internet poses by being this dreamlike realm, but also that's very real thing in our
Yes.
material reality.
Yes, it does have
So
real world consequences and effects
exactly,
like psychologically and physically and all these sorts of things.
and in some sense, I think the subconscious, the unconscious, has always been that way. But the internet, again, as it does with everything, supercharges this and you get the danger of drawing the mass unconscious, the mass subconscious into the real world, right?
Yeah.
The all of mankind's delusions are held, are made manifest in the wired, in the internet, and they pose a danger of then manifesting into reality because of how tied to reality the wired slash the internet is, right? Of just how real it actually is, despite also being a kind of subconscious realm. And I think the implication at the end of Lane is that what's on the other side of the wired, on the other side of the internet, is the pure unconscious, the pure subconscious.
Yeah.
Um, the realm of the pure realm of thought, of mind, of the psyche. And I think when you look at it that way, and you look at it in conjunction with what we've talked about in our Aliens or Demons and Shin Megami Tensei's real episodes, are that that initial, what that those documentary sequences in that episode of Lane are implying is that the aliens are not extraterrestrial, they're ultra-terrestrial in Lane, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah.
these they're demons of the subconscious, they're of the warp, right? Of the wired, of the realm beyond the wired even. And kind of what happened in the lore of Lane in this context implied to be that something, right? Because as the documentary sequences go on, you kind of see how from the Roswell crash, you lead into the creation of the wired, or rather, not creation. I think discovery of the wired, right?
Ah, yes. Yes. It was always
Yeah,
there.
it was always, yeah. Well, and the end of Lane hints that, right? The end
Yeah.
of Lane basically says that, right? Is the wired was always there. Humanity just built the tools to connect to it, right? The wired
Yeah.
was always there. The world beyond the wired was always there. Humanity just built the tools to interface with the wired. And so, what you kind of realize in this context is that the Roswell crash is supremely important because it's where it's implied to be where the technology to interface with the wired kind of gets its origins, right?
Yeah.
In some way, in some manner, via the Majestic 12 and the people tied to it, Vannevar Bush, Ted Nelson. If you watch the episode, you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, and and so you get almost the sense that something from the wired or from beyond the wired broke through into our world in Lane, or maybe in some sense the wired itself, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe that the Roswell crash wasn't an accident. It was something staged, planned to happen by forces from the wired or beyond the wired, so that it could lead to the wired merging with reality, right? And I think that's the fucking Freddy Krueger sweater is actually super important there, because what was Freddy Krueger? A dream demon.
Yeah.
What was his power? Bringing forth dream into reality, right? You die in the dream, you die in real life. In this way, what you're being shown through the aliens in Lane wearing the Freddy Krueger sweaters is these genuinely alien beings, not from another planet, but from a realm beyond reality, from the wired or whatever's beyond it, who are these kind of demonic influences, right? Who their goal is to invade our reality, really. right? What you realize is that there's a literal interdimensional conspiracy to invade and subsume reality from another realm, right? Almost like
Yes.
Godzilla Singular Point, actually, going back to our
Yeah,
first episode.
that is a good point actually. Yeah, no, it's well, yeah, because goes on like a little list of like the technically you could look at it kind of like a timeline of like important like things that happened on this leading up to the manifesting of the Wired. Of yeah, you're starting with Roswell, and then it goes into the Majestic 12 thing, which is a group put together for UFO recovery and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, like you said, like Ted Nelson and Memex memory expansion. That whole the
Yeah,
early
the
conceptualization of digital
early,
storage
yeah, yeah,
and
the
and the
Xanadu
whole
system.
yeah, the whole John C. Lilly part of it too, with his ideas for the E.C.C.O, the Earth Coincidence Control
Oh yes, I
Office.
totally forgot about that. Yeah,
Yes, that really ties into what you're saying of like his ideas of a cosmic hierarchy of like entities, and
yeah.
which it's like yeah, that makes a lot of sense in the context of
No,
that.
yeah, yeah,
When you have all these different layers to like, it's like, oh yeah, you think oh, the government's in the Men in Black. It's like, oh no, it goes further than that. It's like this whole cosmic, or
yeah,
it may not exactly be cosmic. It could be other reality, whatever the the usual. It's like, oh, not actual physical gray aliens from another planet, but like
yeah,
weird interdimensional junk.
yeah. It's this weird kind of. It hints, yeah, that there's this kind of cosmic conspiracy behind the events of the show. Really, where I totally forgot about the John C. Lilly part of the documentary, right? Where it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
E.C.C.O, Earth Coincidence Control Office, right? You have, I mean, and I, yeah, that really ties into what I was saying about how, like, the Roswell crash wasn't a crash, it wasn't an accident. It was, it's almost implied to be something that was planned, that was staged, right? By higher forces to ensure that what they want to happen happens. Um, in this kind of almost like G-man manipulation of reality,
yeah,
right? Um, it reminds me of, again, I think we kind of touched on this in the two episodes about demons and aliens and that stuff. Um, where one of the big parts of that area of research, I guess, right, is this this sense of kind of nonsense as communication, right? Of like you
right,
get
yes,
these weird in a lot of these reports, you get this like a lot of just really weird nonsensical shit happens in these sightings and reports of encounters with entities or whatever. Um, and there's this sense of like either people are being fucked with,
yeah,
or that this is this is something trying to communicate with or to us, but it has trouble and it seems nonsensical to us because um I mean it's like trying to communicate calculus to a rat.
yeah, yeah.
The rat's not
It's
gonna get it. Try as you may, it's not gonna get what the
yeah,
fuck you're saying.
has literally no framework for such
Yeah.
concepts, or it's
So
just
it
not
might
built
be,
for.
yeah. So and so in a way, I'm getting these ideas because I just watched, I just rewatched for the first time in like almost 2 decades. The Mothman Prophecies,
Ooh, yes,
great movie,
very good
great.
one.
Oh,
Yes, it is.
such a fucking great movie, and it touches on a lot of this type of stuff in terms of like like extra dimensional alien intelligences, right? Um, where you almost kind of get the sense that, like, yeah, in this very Lane / John C. Lilly way, right? Earth coincidence control type stuff, that these things almost kind of communicate via coincidences, via strange absurdities that don't make any sense, right? At least to us, because we're too dumb, right? When
Yeah.
we're not higher dimensional beings, so we don't get it. We literally can't comprehend it, right? So in this way, it makes it ironically ends up making complete sense that the Roswell crash it becomes, or rather always was, a method of conveying to humanity how to connect to the wired, as kind of a Trojan horse, right? To get
Yeah.
us to instigate our own doom via the merging of reality and in the wired. And this all I think is genuinely hinted by the fact that that one alien wears a fucking Freddy Krueger sweater.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's just,
too
yeah,
strange and specific to not like, so many people
the
would just pass it
alien.
off of like, oh, the
It's just, yeah,
silly little guy. Oh,
but
weird
but
internet
even then,
shenanigans. You see.
ironically, that por- that portrayal and depiction, and the way it's taken by so many people, is exemplar of what we're talking about here. Of like,
Right. Yeah.
this is all of this is potentially, not saying this is official, but potentially all of this is potentially being communicated via a silly little gray alien in a sweater.
Yeah. I mean,
That's just how these things would actually communicate.
memes are messages from the team.
You heard it here first, folks.
Wow, there's actually deeper meaning to all this slop we've been seeing.
I mean, I've been saying it lately, dude. I like, uh, oh wow, all this stuff that like, because I like do like, I guess, creative writing, you could say. I come up with
Mhm.
lore for my friends' like homebrewed tabletop game. Um Along with just other stuff where I joke about stuff, and then like years later the stupid meme things I come up with for the lore or whatever come true. Or
Yes.
I'll make something up on the fly. It's just like, yeah, this would be stupid and dumb. This would be a funny thing that my brain just concocted. And then it's like, oh hey, this is like legit. And it's like, yeah, memes are messages from the deep.
They are.
And that's what I love about how Lane connects to the whole interdimensional hypothesis of extraterrestrial contact, right? Is that, yeah, a lot of the people in this kind of field really have come to the conclusion that, yeah, they these things communicate via kind of dream logic. At least
Yeah.
that's how it appears to us, right? The
Like
kind
very
of,
weird
you
Twin
know,
Peaks shit.
yeah, exactly. Some Twin Peaks like subconsciousness, right? Where like where Twin Peaks is just a phenomenal example, because you get shit like, what, like the second episode where he's dismissing suspects by like throwing rocks at a bottle whenever he shouts a name.
As you do. Real law enforcement tactic.
Yeah, exactly. And then when one of the Twin Peaks cops asks him, like, where did he come up with this tactic, he literally says, it came to me in a dream. And you're like, okay, Coop,
Yes.
pop off. I mean,
Okay.
he's my king. He's literally me. You gotta love Coop, dude. He's a god. But yeah, that's exemplary of this kind of like dream logic. That's actually like the logic of super intelligent extra dimensional beings,
Mhm.
right? But
Yeah, exactly.
I think the point is that it's something interesting to think about, right? How these weird, ultra terrestrial, interdimensional alien theories on and shit tie together with the more grounded kind of themes of how digital technology affects kind of culture, how it affects social interaction, really how it
Yeah,
affects social expression, how it affects kind of identity and fragments, if not outright erases it over time. Because at the end of it all, you're kind of left wondering when you look at it from this perspective, why?
yeah, yeah.
Why
It's,
why did the aliens or whatever force from the Wired or beyond the Wired even orchestrate this? What was the point? And especially since, at least in the anime, it didn't seem to work,
no,
right?
and it
This
also took this other direction that may have been, I don't know, unintended by the entities, because it evolved into this whole like religious thing with, Eri calling himself God, and, people not being able to disprove that, and then like Lane taking up that mantle, kind of. It's really like strange. Like as you get even further into it, it kind of
well,
tilt. I don't know. It feels like it tilts away
that
from this. Like, oh, there's like, higher entities, and it's just, let's all love Lane. Like she's like the god of the Wired, or goddess of the Wired type of thing. And it's like, whether she co-opted the medium, let's say, or if it was, that was the point, was to push her into that hole or something.
well, so I was about to say, are we sure that's not what they wanted?
Yeah, it's maybe it is.
Well, because you forget, right, that at the end of Lane, this is the most important thing, is Lane resets the universe.
Right,
To
yeah,
not only does the Wired not, maybe not exist, but the humanity can't interface with it anymore. Like wholly, like not in the way it can, right? You still have the internet, as in fact, the ending of Lane seems to imply that our world is the reset universe of Lane's world, right? Because you don't have the Wired, you just have the internet as it exists in reality now.
yeah,
At the end of the show, and perhaps more pertinently, her own existence is removed from this universe. So there is no more Let's All Love Lane.
yeah. It just kind of
That
becomes
gets
a
erased.
an observer. So
E- Exactly. So you're kind
yeah,
of left. You get the sense that that outcome is actually what the aliens didn't want,
right.
right?
Which, I mean, she did co-opt it, and may have gone against their wishes in that sense of, you know, I almost had it for a moment, but it's just like, damn, this sucks.
You kind of get this. Yeah, you get this sense that for Lane, yeah, godhood is not good because it's wholly removed from the human experience, and that
Yeah,
the human experience is something more worthwhile than divinity itself. In fact, the show hints that that one of the possibilities of Lane's existence is that she already existed before, right? Because you find out that she's fake,
Mhm.
basically, right?
Yeah.
That I forget, was she created by Tachibana Labs or the Men in Black? I forget. I think it was Tachibana Labs.
Yeah, Tachibana Labs and Irie, the
Yeah.
so-called
So,
self-proclaimed god of the Wired.
so she's basically a homunculus, right?
Yeah.
But what's implied by the end is that, like, it's not that she was created whole cloth, but that she was an existence that what she was before she was Lane was an existence that precedes not just Lane, but really the world, everything basically, right?
Yeah.
That she was an entity from the Wired or beyond it, even that was
Which,
somehow put into a human body and made to experience life as a human.
yes. Which is funny because there's that scene too where she appears to her friend with the body of the little alien
Of
in the
the
sweater,
alien, that's
but
right.
with just
Yeah.
her head on it.
That could be a hint of her true nature, that she is in a way maybe not of the same faction or type as the aliens, but she's a similar entity.
Yeah.
And so that makes the conclusion at the end that her experiences are so worthwhile as a human, is that she's willing to erase herself from existence because her existence as a non-human jeopardizes the things she cares about as a
Hmm.
human world. Really important, right? It's very impactful, I want to say.
Yeah.
um Whenever you have anything where a non-human, higher intelligence incarnates into a human, you got to get to the Jesus allegory, right? Like
Oh,
that's,
of course, yes.
I mean, like, again, that's also something I really don't see talked about a lot, is Lane as Christ allegory, because she's literally an incarnation of a higher force in human corporeal form, who has to suffer as a human, but also love and come to understand humanity intimately in order to really appreciate the world. And then, of course, while she doesn't literally die, in a way, she I mean, you could basically call being erased from existence a kind of death.
Hmm.
And she does it for the sins of humanity, really, right? Like all of these terrible things that are, yes, a result of the Wired, right? And the forces in the background, like Tachibana and Eri, to merge the Wired and reality, but also just because of how humans react to that,
Yeah,
right?
right.
The things people have chosen to do with that, right? It's not you really can't just blame it on the Wired itself, right? Humanity chose what to do with the Wired, to how to interact and act out with it. So in a way, you could say that, yeah, like Lane literally dies for our sins so that we can live in a world without the Wired and not be tempted by that.
Yeah. I was gonna say there's that funny that part two where again it was still before she fully kind of realized what was going on, where she literally appeared in the clouds, lane to the world, at least to
Yeah,
Tokyo.
yeah,
Like just like, like a Virgin Mary like type imagery. It just manifested, even though she was still like around with her friends and saw it happen. We're like, oh shit. So yeah,
no,
it does
yeah.
tie into that kind of like imagery too, of course.
There is some Christ imagery in the show. It's when it comes to anything out of Japan, it's always a kind of coin toss of whether it actually means something or they just think it looks cool and
Yeah.
foreign, right? But yeah, it could be that is an intentionality behind that. So I guess the last thing I want to touch upon that I think is also like a big, like nice bow on the whole
Hmm.
package of everything we've been talking about with regards to Lane is this concept of, and I'm sure you've seen it floating around here because of a certain group of people with funny PFPs. The term network spirituality.
Ah, yes.
do,
Hmm.
do you know anything about that? What's your extent of your knowledge about that?
It's I mean, not enough. It's more just like a you could kind of like interpret this. I honestly don't even know how I can articulate it. So
So it's okay.
yeah,
I
I
probably
kind
couldn't have
of
done
like
it
I
much
get
justice.
the vibe and the this emerging spirituality, not a kind of pseudo religion kind of belief system.
So here, I probably couldn't have done it justice myself either. So I have, I guess, the screed here. I'll just
Mm.
read it off. Network spirituality is the futurist embrace of experiential hyperreality found in the web's accelerated networks, a lens in which to efficiently and safely engage lucid virtuality and the internalization of its new cultural modes and mores. Though the esoteric school also furthers a Lanist occultism around persona egregores, positing the development of genuine spiritual entities spontaneously self-organized as hyper-real entities in the catalyzed collective consciousness, veritable deities, network angels, and demons. Network spirituality could be the new contrarian ideology, embedding spiritual and moral values into memes and merits engraved in naturally self propagating distributed ledgers. Watch. Personal computing is the new right to bear arms and will promptly be banned soon. Network spirituality, the unified ecosystem of posting, of interdependent roles embedded in the network and embodied by posters, who lubricate the system for hived art production. Each poster, each poster, each part operates independently yet constitutes the whole. Network spirituality and schizo-autist posting schizo-autist posting's primary goal is to destroy the normie within, which will open the pathways for the new gods of the network to possess you. It's a revival of tradition. The gods are with you in this holy jihad. In 5 years, network spirituality will be an accepted concept as we continue to integrate these technologies more deeply into our lives and we increasingly realize we need something religion to navigate the cultural maelstrom of the internet. Network spirituality is a force that takes us back to our earliest dreams and memories, begging the question whether that desire to be divine is what makes us so human or the other way around. Network spirituality is the state of tapping into a shared consciousness when you can communicate at the speed of thought with telepathy. Network spirituality is the shedding of meat space ego and the adoption of a wired persona that's plugged into a network hive. Network spirituality is each one of us as a unique nodal point on a unified field, every interaction being an act of creation, the expression of your individuality as meaningful pleasure that drives evolution on the micro and macro scale. Network spirituality is the collective prana of thousands of young artists channeling their artistic vision and manifesting it online. When encountered, you can feel the energy emanating out of your keyboard. It's visceral, it's electric, it's divine. Pure, refined, crystal clear reality is here and now. Be agreeable and normal today. The perfect movement will be replayed infinitely. Calm and serenity will come to digital Valhalla. Network spirituality has no beginning and no end. Press start. And it goes on it and,
Mhm.
and on basically. But um this concept this has been floating around. I've been seeing it. I think a lot of people, if you're in certain spaces online, you see it, right?
Mhm.
You know the miladies and all
Ah,
that
yes,
all that shit,
yes.
right? The the various forms of accelerationism and such. But I think what this idea of network spirituality really captures is, for all the schizo babble that I just uttered, that the internet is kind of, how would you call it? Well, I mean, it's a paradigm shift in every realm, I think, of the human condition.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
it's
it,
definitely uncharted territory. Like,
well,
there's no
it's
basis for this.
well, ironically, I think there actually kind of is, and
Hmm.
I think the schizo screed I just said are part of it, because it's a very long thing. I didn't do all of it. Is the hints at a return to a kind of tradition, right? Of a kind of reaction to modernity, to postmodernity. I've been toying with this idea that, you ever heard of the cypherpunks?
Cypherpunks? No, I don't think I have.
Cypherpunk was this movement in the early days of the internet of basically privacy maximizing, right? The idea was that the internet could offer a kind of security on anonymity unlike any other in human history, if people just knew how to secure themselves, right? If they learned to code, right? If they learned various different types of encryption and other security for themselves, right? And that this anonymity, this security could be revolutionary, right? You have out of this movement comes stuff like the Declaration of Independence of the internet, right?
Yeah.
And this dream that the internet was going to revolutionize the world. It was the next step in this unending series of progress that had begun during in the Enlightenment, right? It was the next stage, right? Most of the cyberpunk movement was rather left wing, rather anti-capitalist and so forth. And while there were naysayers back in the day, most of the internet, I think, was on board with most, if not all, of these ideas. And then, of course, what do you find in the reality of what's happened was that actually the internet was not a boon for the left. If anything, it's hindered it. It's hurt it. It was a massive boon for the right, though.
Hmm.
We've seen the resurgence of ideologies and a kind of rebirth of ideas that haven't been seen in a long time. Not just century-old ones from the days of fascism, but earlier even, right? From pre-Enlightenment ideas even.
Oh yeah.
Kind of making a return, right? You get you you get you you get I mean, really, one has to acknowledge how the internet right has been really at the forefront of new ways of thinking about things, even if they're a kind of recycling of old ideas. Oftentimes, I mean, this network spirituality, I think, is a great example of how these are genuinely new ideas, even if they're taking old ideas, they're building something new out of them, right?
Hmm.
Thinkers like Charlotte Fang here, who I was reading off one of their posts talking about network spirituality, or Nick Land, just so on and so forth. Mencius Moldbug, all figures that have really kind of opened new headways in how people in the West generally think about things, right? How an expansion of kind of thought that hasn't been seen in a while, right? Um, and it's left the left kind of playing catch up, right? You haven't seen. I mean, not that it's been a super long time, but like, when was the last time the left had guys like that coming up with ideas like this? So, frankly, in a strange, ironic twist of events, the left is the one who's kind of just regurgitating old ideas, its own traditions, um, who haven't really gotten anything groundbreaking out of the left since the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, Mark
Yeah.
Fisher, Reza Neguristani, whatever his name is, Baudrillard, right? Um, you haven't gotten anything new for about 2 decades now. Whereas in that time, the right has been making waves, and it's been making it's you don't I don't think you get such a meteoric rise and spread across not just reality but the internet without having something compelling to say.
Yeah. Right.
And this is all to say that the internet has proven to be actually a tool for the return of the old, not just in terms of political ideas. That I think that's just a that's the major way people recognize or are starting to recognize this particular aspect of the internet. But I think even in terms of as network spirituality indicates, spirituality, religion, right? Um,
Yeah.
how the internet kind of is it gives us a glimpse into and is ushering, in a sense, a kind of return to a world of superstition, right? Of demons and angels and spirits and and gods, even, right? Things, yeah, it's almost ushering the return of these things that were once banished by the light of enlightenment
Yeah.
and rationality, that are slowly but steadily, thanks to the internet, making a return, being ushered back into the world again, much as we were talking about in those 2 episodes, right? Of, you know, the King's Pact sealed them, but we've invented ways to see without seeing and speak without speaking. We've recreated the obsidian mirrors of the Aztec priests, right? We've summoned them with our circuitry sigils, right? We're bringing back the ethereal, the magical, the spiritual. Um, and I think one of the things that people need to grasp about that is, I think that comes with a return of a certain political dimension as well as this kind of ethereal, spiritual dimension. Because in a way, what can you boil down the conflict between left and right than a conflict between left, rational thinking, scientific thinking, enlightenment thinking, and the right, magical thinking, irrational thinking, pre-enlightenment thought, right? Really human as such thought, right? Like
Yeah.
primal human, right? It's this strange new but old world that the Wired has ushered in. I am I am reminded of Bramsky's quote: "The old world is dying, and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters." And I think that's, aside from all the other stuff that Lane was downright prophetic about, it was talking about, that no one really, of all the things that it was really getting at, that no one really seems to have gotten over the years. I think that may perhaps be the biggest and most important primary one. That's where I leave it. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, no, that that was a perfect coverage of the as I was saying, the uncharted, but maybe not so much waters we're treading as a civilization of
Well, yeah.
but that is it too. It's like, to us it may be, new, even though a lot of this stuff is like, oh, just ideas just coming out under a new coat of paint, a new, gotta fit it into the modern world, but also there's like the real traditionalism that people wish for forever now, thanks to, in part, the
But
internet.
yeah, exactly. Even those movements are created and fueled by the internet, right?
Yes. And yeah, and the internet's effects on other things too. Of when you were talking about that, it just made me think of that Vatican mascot of Lucid. Like I was just like, that would never have happened had the internet not existed. Like that, so many things coalesced into that happening of a new face, and it even bringing the conflicts of centuries ago too with it, of oh, the Orthodox and the Protestants and the Catholics are all yelling at each
No,
other
yeah.
again on the internet, and it's like, oh, like the good old days. It's like
Yeah.
arguing, it's like, oh, you're icons and you're worshiping a demon. It's like, bro, it's just like a Funko Pop. What are you talking about?
Yeah, again, I think the new world that's coming is actually is really a much older world in just a cyberpunk coat of paint,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
right? I think at this point, a lot of the old ways, a lot of what are popularly considered to be new, a lot of what is popularly considered to be new, is in fact old, right?
yes.
A big example. I always cringe whenever I hear someone even utter the phrase "late stage capitalism." Do you know when the
Right.
first recorded usage of that term was?
No, actually.
1905.
Ooh. Oh, they've been 100 years
And,
over.
and that's just recorded. That's just the first instance that we know of that was written down somewhere. It's likely that it's older, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think that's just a prime example. That is a over 100-year-old term now. What have we been in late stage capitalism for 100+ years? Or is it safe to say that's just a cope of a term now, and it always
Yeah.
has been, in fact. The ideas of socialism, communism, Marxism, those are almost 200 years old now.
Yeah.
The Enlightenment, I mean, holy shit, dude. Like that's yeah, that's several centuries at this point.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's safe to say that a lot of the ideas that are coming back are functionally new. And by merging with the new technologies, they become genuinely new, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're not the same as they used to be. They're augmented by technology, by digital technology, right? And so they become something genuinely new, even if they don't appear that way, depending on your perspective. But I think it's safe to say now that to a lot of people, what these seemingly new ideas of enlightenment, rational, modernist or postmodernist thought are what's old had, are the old way of thinking that needs to go. And I think to tie this back into Lane, the question that I think is really posed by Lane, if we consider that this is really what Lane is fundamentally actually talking about, is well, what the fuck do you do with that? How do
Ah,
you
yeah.
what is the solution to this? What is the answer to this problem? What is the new? What is the old? What is what is next? Right? That people
Mhm.
that's the other big tagline of the show. Close the world, open the next. What is in the next world? What is next? I think ultimately that's going to be up for people at large to
Oh, of
decide,
course,
right?
yeah. And may not be
Um,
found, may not be answered if either ever or, for the longest time.
yeah, we
Yeah,
might not live to see it, frankly.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
we're still barely like, oh, the horrors that can come of the internet yet, that have yet to
yep.
be unleashed. The monsters, as you say.
But I think the show has an answer. And I think because I think the writer of the show, Chiaki J. Konaka, I think Konaka had his answer too. Has his answer, right? Which is to just to quote a great movie, don't go full retard.
Ah, yes.
But and I think it's important that at the end of Lane, she gets rid of the wired, but the internet is like it's not like she pulls a fucking tracer tong, like at the end of Deus Ex.
Mhm.
The there's no wired, but the internet exists. A kind of lesser wired, right? The internet as we know it. So I think what Kanaka was kind of trying to say there was that let's not go too far, but the new world is coming whether we like it or not, right? And I think Kanaka was trying to say that if we shape this in a human centric way, the world in a human centric way, in a magically thought out way, the new world can actually be a good and beautiful place. And that's why ultimately I brought up the political stuff in this episode, is because it's kind of well known by now that Konaka is not a left winger, not by any means. He's
No.
very right wing. He's very right wing. So I think if anyone like it's funny considering the fan base of Lane. Um and I think that's part of why a lot of these ideas haven't been talked about, at least not in this way, in this manner. Even though I think it's really accurate to do so because Konak is a right winger and he's always been a right winger.
Mhm.
So I think to say that his show doesn't have a right wing message, I don't think you can say that. I don't think that's true. I don't think you can um I don't think you can love Lane and not groove with those ideas, right? I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
those ideas, his ideas are his way of thinking is infused into the show, and I don't think you can. remove the author from the work. And so I think if we're looking at what Lane as a show is trying to say, I think we have to consider that.
What a what a ride it is, honestly.
This
It's
has been an episode of all time, yeah.
truly very fitting. Very it's nice when all of the things we talk about coalesce and our grand unified theory here at Schizopunk.
The Black Knight satellite is using me to convey its teachings and ideas to the world.
Yeah, see another part of the internet and its effects, and we may be joking, but also unless yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you just get ideas and just like, where the hell did that come from? Like, what was that? That was a good idea. The subconscious? I don't know. Personify it as this like entity that grants us visions and stories and theories and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, another thing that without the internet, I doubt you'd ever be talking about that. Literally ever. We'd never make those jokes.
Yeah.
It'd be like jokes, quote unquote.
Mothman and Indrid Cold are beaming ideas and information into my brain from the Akashic records via the Mob Zone. Send tweet.
Yeah, real, actual. See, every corner of the internet is starting their new little cults and religions, and yeah, we here are the Black Knight's strongest soldiers.
So true. So real.
Passed down from Philip K. Dick, of course, and our predecessors who also understood this.
Exactly. We're here. We were put on this earth by the Black Knight satellite so that we could tell you that. So that we could tell you all of this, right? We're here to illuminate the. We're here to act as prophets by informing you of all the Black Knight's previous secret profits that no one realized because I don't know, you suck.
Oh, okay, yeah, we get that. It's getting into some like Orange Catholic Bible stuff. It's like, damn. Actually, reincarnations of the Buddha?
No, we're reincarnations of Philip K. Dick.
Oh, yes, of course. My
Philip K. Dick,
prophetic visions in my
Philip K. Dick and Burroughs. That's what we're doing reincarnations of.
There we go. Oh, Christ.
But who's who? Which one's Burroughs and which one's
No, we already
Dick?
know I'm Burroughs because of my naked lunch
right, yes, of course.
adventures.
Right, yes. So that makes me PKD. Awesome.
Yeah, there we go. See what the internet's done to us.
In a past life, I was Philip K. Dick. Send tweet.
Damn.
Well,
that's a good place to end it. I'd suppose.
Yeah, that's all, folks.
Yes.
And, yeah, don't fall prey to the serpent.
No. Yeah, exactly. And
don't be subsumed by the hyper reality. Use it. Right? You gotta be like Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, right? You barely adopted the hyper reality. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see anything genuine until I was a young man.
Mold? Is that a mold bug reference?
Oh, all right, it's time. Yeah, it's time to end it. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.